And action. Live from New York, it's Show and Tell.
Hello, I'm Billy. Usually I talk about vintage knitting on this podcast, but today I have a different kind of a guest who's had a very unusual vintage experience. She comes from Alaska, and I think I'm just going to bring her right on so we can get right into it. I'll be right back. Okay, so I am back with my guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself because she can pronounce her name better than I can. I know that she's from Fairbanks, Alaska, so I've already prepped her to answer my one and only standard question, which is, if we're tourists in your town, what would we not find in a tour book? So, Deanna, take it away.
I would say, well, my name's Deanna, and I live, of course, in Fairbanks, Alaska. I would say the one thing that a lot of people don't think to do is, if you're big into kayaking or canoeing, is to float our river, the China. Enjoy seeing Fairbanks from a different point of view.
I have not been to Fairbanks. I have been to Alaska, but I just can't believe that you are my second guest to hail from Fairbanks.
I saw, yeah, you interviewed Emily.
Of all the places in the world, to have two vintage lovers from the same, I would imagine it's a rather small city. Do you know the population?
Oh gosh, no. It's a college and military town, so it's constantly in flux. So when the school year is ended, it kind of drops, but we rise because of the tourists, and then it drops again and then rises with the students. And when the military goes through its changes of units moving, it's constant. I consider it constantly in flux. So I don't know. Sorry, Mosquito. The only thing in Alaska you have to worry about, the state bird.
I'll look up the population, because I can't imagine that it's a very big city.
No.
But here we are. I'm with another person from Fairbanks, Alaska. The reason that I've invited you to be here is because you have done an unusual vintage journey that I think will be the envy of a lot of viewers. I think that's how I came to know about you, probably through your pictures on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe that you're a married woman, right?
Yep, happily married.
I'm also married, and I think it would be very unusual for me to take a cruise without my husband.
Oh.
Now, there must be some reason why that happened. The cruise is probably the trip of a lifetime.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that the sticker price is hefty, because wherever this ship sailed from, did it sail from New York or did it sail from Southampton?
Southampton.
So to get from Fairbanks, Alaska to Southampton, England, how many hours did that take?
I want to say roughly probably about 24 hours. I flew out from Alaska in the morning. I got to Seattle, and I was there for a couple hours. And then I flew overnight to London. And so I got there about early, like mid-morning to London.
Direct from Seattle to London?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow, that's a good hop.
Yeah, it's a good hop, but luckily it's a night flight, so you kind of sleep, so.
And then you sailed from Southampton to New York?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start to hear about this cruise. Is the entire ship part of this vintage extravaganza, or is it a select group of people?
It's a select group of people. So we traveled with Ahoy Vintage Cruises for the Alex Menhem and his orchestra. We were just our own little group, about 200 people.
A little group.
Yeah, a little group. I consider a little group considering how large the ship is. A little group. So we all met up the Friday before for a bon voyage party and a small concert by Alex and his orchestra, which was open to the public, not just our group. And then Sunday.
So that's on land.
That was in land. That was in London. And then on Sunday morning, we all met at one location and jumped on buses to drive to Southampton. And once we all got boarded and settled, we had a beginner cocktail, and that was really where all of us got together. We got to kind of all see each other for the first time, I think.
These people had come from all over the world?
Oh, yes. There was a large group I know from Switzerland, so some people from Germany, France. I believe there was someone from Australia, all over the United States, England. There might have been a few other countries. I don't remember now that it's been several months and gotten back into everyday life.
I know I really wanted to talk to you when you were fresh off the boat, because I knew that things would be like, much more exciting having just happened. But in any event, how did you hear about this cruise?
I think I heard about it, kind of saw it through Instagram. It came across my feed one day back in 2020. 2020, at the end fall of 2020. I kind of came across my feed and like, oh, that would be exciting. And I saw the date for it was April of 2022. And I turned 40 this year. And that's why I went on this trip. I wanted to have a big adventure to celebrate turning 40.
I think it's extremely courageous. I am a world traveler, and I have traveled by myself through Africa for 9 weeks as a much younger woman. But now as a married woman, I would find it very unusual, especially this setting where there's evenings surrounding dancing to a live orchestra without my dance partner. Were people open to sharing their husbands or significant others?
Well, I am not the world's best ballroom dancer. I've done stage dancing when I was in high school, but I'm not. And so I don't dance much. I went for the music and to enjoy watching them. That to me was like the highlight. I would sit, have my cocktail, and I just watched them gracefully move across the floor, listening to the music, and felt like I had just been transported back in time. And that's what I really liked about it. I did get on the dance floor a couple times. I got on with the floor with Tom, who is the Ahoy Vintage Cruises coordinator and like director. And then I also we did the conga, so I got to enjoy that. But it was, I think for me, the whole trip was a sense of letting go of the worries of the world. I have a very loving, supporting husband. I do solo trips, usually to like Seattle or to visit some friends in California, but because I know those places. But I had been in London a couple times when I was a teenager through school trips. So to go back to London as an adult with nobody but a friend who lives in London just to help me get around a few places was a challenge, but an exciting challenge for me. It was like, I have to figure this out on my own. Next thing I know, I felt like I'd lived in London for 20 years.
Traveling in a city, touring around in a city as a single person is, to me, a very different experience than being on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
Where you have to sort of make yourself fit in. If you're just, pedestrian on a London street, you don't have a group that you have to fit into.
Yeah.
Plus, there was this added layer of everyone is dressing to the nines.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So tell me about the luggage that you brought. How many suitcases? Were there hat boxes involved? And some of the other people, I'm sure that there were some people in this group who were real standouts, who probably had 16 valises and a hat box for every night of the cruise.
Oh yeah. So for me, I only had 3 suitcases because I had, because I'm all the way from Alaska. I condensed it to 3 suitcases. One was my carry-on, which had a spare set of clothes, my spare set of clothes, just in case my luggage did not make it. But all my suitcases did make it. So I only had 3. So I was actually probably a small chunk of change compared to someone. We all met to go to Southampton. There's just a wall of suitcases in front of me. Some people had 4, some had 5. I remember seeing a couple, I think with between the 2 of them, I would say 8 to 9 suitcases, maybe 10. Hat boxes are everywhere. I mean, there were people, we dressed to travel. We were all dressed ready to travel.
So paint a picture for us. How were people, I mean, I can carry 1 suitcase in each hand, But if you're two people with 8 pieces of luggage, you're not carrying this. So can you paint a picture of who was handling this luggage from, let's say they arrive in a taxi at the dock or the pier? Who's managing all of this?
Actually, Cunard was. So when we got off the bus, there was a Cunard representative. Our luggage stayed on the bus. We got off so we could go through the COVID testing and the queues to get on the boat. They took our luggage to a central spot where it'd be taken off because we had put our room number tags on our luggage. So our luggage would be then put onto carriers to put onto the boat, and then the stewards and luggage handlers would put our suitcases outside our room. So that was luxury, not having to handle and get your suitcase onto the Queen Mary 2 by yourself. But the handling it to get it from the hotels and onto the buses or the taxis, everybody kind of helped each other. If you were looking like you were struggling, someone was going to come over and kind of help you a little bit, get it to where we needed it. And the bus drivers were really awesome. They were the ones getting our luggage onto the buses and keeping it organized and trying to make sure bags stayed together for each unit, you would say. So that was actually pretty impressive for me. I almost never really handled my suitcase after I went on the bus. It was like, whew. It wasn't until I got back to the United States that I actually had to handle my suitcase again.
It sounds just like a dream. For me, maybe a little bit of a nightmare because I'm so accustomed to packing light. Like my whole life has been drilled into me, pack light. I went on a trip when I used to do business in Europe. I brought one of my customers along with me. She had never traveled abroad before, and she didn't know how to pack. She packed a suitcase that in France, they were calling it un coffre, a trunk. We could have gotten on our flight, although we were late, but for her suitcase, they couldn't get it on the flight fast enough. So we had to stay overnight and take the next day's flight because of my friend not packing light. So, you learn your lesson. I've been really, really conditioned to doing that. So if I was doing something, how many days was this cruise?
7 days.
7 days. So if I had to have 2 or 3 costume changes for each of those days, I would make it my business to get that into one very large suitcase. I'm very independent. So it's frustrating to me if I can't manage everything on my own. But I have seen people who come to New York for events here that are Art Deco events, and they have all this luggage matching their outfits and the hat boxes and different handbag, different shoe for every outfit. So yeah, it takes up space. So what was the most spectacular outfit that you saw anybody wearing?
Oh gosh. Oh,
because I'm sure there were some doozies.
Oh, there was these 2 lovely ladies that were just dressed to the nines in like 20 styles, down to the very large hats. They were almost fur and hats every night. I don't even know if I ever saw them during the day, but during the night they were less like the big fur hats, the big stoles. There was one lady for our black and white gala that was dressed in a robe de styles, sort of 1920s Harlequin French costume ball dress that was just exquisite. There were people in vintage 30s gowns that they walked by and my jaw dropped. I was like, oh gosh, that is exquisite. For me, I had to sew most of my own clothes. I am not a standard size, and true vintage is sometimes hard to find when you're not. So for me, and I know a lot of people did sew their own garments. And so I sewed quite a bit of my own garments. And I was able to pick up a few things in London from reproduction companies, but most everything I brought was either sewn by me or was something that could work as vintage, but wasn't vintage.
So these reproduction companies, were those provided to you by the cruise organizers? You just knew?
Like this dress I'm actually wearing, I got at Vivian of Holloway because I've been eyeing her dresses for years online. And well, when you're in London, you might as well go do a little shopping. So I was able to pick up some dresses and some trousers. But for me, yeah, pretty much everyone's outfits were provided by themselves. They either like had it, made it, or had acquired it for this trip.
No, I meant the name of the
Oh no,
establishment. Like if they said, you know, here's a list of places while we're in London, you can go find vintage clothes if you don't have with you.
I don't think so, but a lot of people were talking. We have our lounge, our Ahoy Vintage Lounge Facebook group, so where everyone can chat about like what they're going to do, any suggestions of things to do. Like some people were going ahead a week ahead. Like, hey, I'm going to Scotland. I'm working my way down. Any suggestions? So people were suggesting places to go shopping. But I'd always known about Vivian Holloway for years, and it was finally like a dream come true for me.
So there was a lot of socializing, networking before you all arrived on the ship.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, is this a cruise that takes place every year, or is it multiple times a year, or?
Well, it's going to be coming multiple. It's probably going to become multiple times a year. Originally, my trip was supposed to be done in the spring of 2020, but of course, we had the pandemic, and that pushed it off until 2022. Earlier, May was supposed to be the Glenn Miller Band, but they have moved theirs to 2023 because some people have pulled out because of safety concerns at the time. And this October, I believe, is Dandy Wellington and his band are going to be doing the crossing from Southampton to New York.
Is it always just that direction?
Yes, because if you were to go west to east, you lose time. You lose an hour. But if you go east to west with the sun, you gain an hour. So we actually gain time. So we're on the boat a little longer.
Ah, sweet. Well, you know, back in the day, 100 years ago, when people first started traveling on these luxury liners, they would do round trip. You know, they would spend the summer in Europe, and then there were no planes yet. So you had to go both ways.
Yeah.
So tell us about the ship. It's the Queen Mary 2?
Yes, the Queen Mary 2. It is outstanding. I've never been on a cruise ship before of any kind.
Oh.
So,
so let's just go with the best one the first time.
Yeah, and I would like it's considered more of an ocean liner because it actually travels across the ocean, where cruise ships usually pop along a shoreline, a coastal line, and stop for a day here, and then they'll take 2 days to get to the next port. Queen Mary does do that, I know, through northern Europe, like Norway and Germany and all that stuff, but it does cross the Atlantic quite a bit more. So it's an ocean liner. So it's vastly large. It's probably the largest thing I've ever been on or wandered, but it feels like that at first, but by the end, it kind of feels a little cozier because you get to know the ship, you get to know where things are located. And next thing you know, what you think feels like it's miles away is you're there. So, because the first day I got kind of turned around, didn't know where I was at, couldn't figure out where some things were located. But by the end, it felt like home.
How many passengers were on the ship? Do you know?
I think well over 2,000. That included our group. And then the staff is at least over 1,000.
But 2,000 passengers is not exactly a large number of passengers for an ocean liner, because some of these other cruise ships, like the ones that leave Alaska, can have 4,000 passengers plus crew.
I think it might be more, but
I saw this ship in New York. There was one moment in time when both, I think it was the QE2, maybe they were retiring it and they were introducing the Queen Mary 2. they were both in New York Harbor and they had them like passing one another. And I
Yeah.
remember that they were so long and so tall, like the height of it was like skyscraper height almost. Well, no, sorry, the length of it. I've seen an image, maybe I can look for that. They show
Yeah.
these ships standing on end in a photograph, like a drawing.
Yeah.
And they're as tall as a New York skyscraper.
Yeah,
So
there might
when
have
they're
been.
sailing by at the end of like 42nd Street, it's unbelievably large. It fills like the whole street and beyond. It's hard to picture what I'm saying. I'll see if I can find some images
Yeah.
of that. It's quite an experience.
I think there might have been more, like I said, for me, it became kind of this art group and everything was more of a bubble for me. So if there were more people, I didn't always know because we were also with our group. So when Alex played, we would just us, it was just for us most of the time. It was just our group. We ate dinner in the same, most of us ate dinner at the same location as a group. We did our events together. So the only time I really got to mix with since the general travelers was lunch or breakfast. And usually breakfast, I'm just like, give me my coffee, give me my food. I gotta wake up.
How many dining rooms are on that ship?
So there's the Britannia room restaurant, which is the largest. And then I know each of the grills, the Queen's Grill and the Princess Grill have their own restaurants. And then there's the King's Court, which is kind of like a nice little food court, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I believe the Golden Lion, which is their little pub, has a menu. And then of course, room service.
Were you able to eat in any dining room or only certain ones?
For certain ones, I think I was only allowed the Britannia restaurant, the King's Court, because I was just a general room. I didn't get one of the Queen's or Princess Grill's rooms, which are more state rooms. So they have like their own private dining facility. So some people on our trip were actually in those rooms. So they with the rest there, where most of us ate down at the Britannia.
And
So,
is the decor like the older ships? Is it Art Deco?
yes, it's I would say a form of contemporary deco. It has that feel of it. The layout of the ship is probably more contemporary than the original ships were, but you walk in, the elevators have a deco feel with the Britannia room, the carpets, the art on the walls, everything around there has a deco feel, like sculptures and art, like, yeah, it's just, it was just like a dream come true.
So I'm named for my grandfather, whose name was William Miller, also known as Bill Miller. There's a well-known ocean liner authority named Bill Miller, not my grandfather, who's long deceased, but I've met this other Bill Miller. And I'll put some information in the show notes below about his books if people are interested in knowing about these luxury transatlantic ocean liners from back in the day. Even today, I imagine they're spectacular, but back then it was such an unbelievable thing. I mean, I've read a little bit about it. Women from New York, wealthy women from New York, would go to Europe on these liners, and all the fashion houses would give them clothing as a gift to wear back in the States, because it was like advertising for them. So it must have been just such an incredible time. Probably, I'm guessing, a little different than it is today, because we have other travel options today, and our pace at which we live our lives is so much faster. Back then, I think it was like, maybe it took a couple of weeks to cross. Now it's 5 days.
Yeah, 5, 7 days. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I took this trip instead of just like, I'm going to fly to Europe and spend some time in London where it is fast paced. I had to slow down because I wasn't going to go anywhere. I had from the stern to the bow to the stern. It was it. Starboard to port, that's it. That was my city. I couldn't go anywhere else. So I learned to slow down. And that was really what I appreciated about it. I had all these grandiose plans. Like I was going to draw. I'm an artist, so I was going to draw. I was going to maybe do needlework, get picks up needlework supplies up, or learn how to knit. But in the end, it ended up being a place for me to just stop, to just think about myself, to find out and think, what do I want to make my priorities are? My families are there, but my family's very supportive of being creatives, to doing what we want to do for ourselves. And so it just became this point of slowing down. And I felt calmer when I got home.
Imagine if you had been knitting. Well, you don't know because you're not really a knitter, you said.
Yeah. Like I said, I only have the 2 little hats I've made, and that's about it right now.
Yeah, they look pretty good. They look pretty
Thank
good.
you.
Did you see anybody on the ship knitting?
Actually, I don't think I did. There probably was 1 or 2 probably knitting. I just didn't catch them because it's a rather, like I said, large ship. So people were in different areas. People I know went to the library. Where the weather kind of got a little sour, so a lot of people weren't out on deck. So I bet if I had gone on deck and it was a nice, beautiful day, there'd probably be someone sitting in one of the deck chairs knitting away. And some people definitely danced well into the wee hours in the morning. So I didn't really see them until like the next evening because they were recovering.
Well, you mentioned that you make a lot of your own clothing so that you can get the fit that you need. I think that's a good reason to knit as well. And knitting is very forgiving because there's stretch to it.
Yeah.
So if you knit a sweater that's, and 1/2 an inch too small, you can get it the extra 1/2 inch by wetting it and blocking it. So I hope you'll consider learning. It's a wonderful hobby and it's very relaxing. Most people today who are knitting will tell you it's meditative because it's very repetitive. You do the same motion. You don't really have to think about it once you get in that groove. And you can knit vintage patterns, which is really what my show generally is about. I'm not wearing a sweater today. It's so dang hot and humid in New York that even a cotton sweater I think would be uncomfortable. But it's something to think about. There's some beautiful 30s and 40s patterns out there.
It is my plan. So Alaska, it's summertime, so the sun is up all the time, and we, after being stuck inside all winter long, we try to be outside. So I'm out usually in my garden, biking, kayaking or kayaking around. So one winter it gets here and it gets kind of colder and darker. I have some knitting. I do have quite a few knitting friends. I'm gonna be poking them. Let's get together for some coffee, and can you show me more than just my hat that I learned how to do from a knitting class?
There's so many fabulous YouTube videos of people who teach specific techniques. I mean, I can also help you a little bit online if needed. I encourage you to do that, and then you'll come back and show us all the wonderful things that you've knit.
I did bring out a few things that I did receive from our trip.
Oh, so, good.
So for our trip, she had her own very special program that was designed by Alex and is based on an actual 1930s program. And inside we had what our planned theme, who the band was, the rest of the orchestra and Alex. And then we had themed nights. So like
wonderful.
Oh, it is. So like our first night was a cocktail party. And then our first major dance was the Black and White Ball, which is also the Queen Mary II's gala, which is they do one every trip. So that's hosted by the captain. And so So it's like a welcome aboard thing. And so this is my little program from that. That was really cute to keep. We had, was here on the rooftop of New York, high times at Coconut Grove, midnight in Mayfair. And then Alex did pay for the entire, the ship one night, which was awesome. I thought that was great because the people were kind of always like, you know, peeking around corners and watching us as we walked by. So them to get to hear Alex and see us all was a lot of fun. We had a fiesta ball, and then we also had like a pajama party and sing-alongs and ask the band and jam sessions. We had a lot of fun things just to kind of keep us going. And then, yeah, it's just a beautiful little program, gilded. This is just the inside, and I got Alex to sign it. And just like, it's just exquisitely fun. Some like suggested cocktails with nautical themes. And yeah. And then this is actually one of the favorites, is because if anyone doesn't know, Alex will be doing this trip again in the fall of 2023. So they have time to plan. And then this is actually from the original Queen Mary. It's this big art piece that was in the original Queen Mary. So this whole program is just so special, and I keep it safe because it's gonna be one of those fun memories for me. I'm gonna look back at this and just suddenly feel like I'm transported when I close my eyes.
It's amazing. I'm glad you showed the part with the information about the next cruise, because there might be people watching this who would like to participate in that.
One thing, I can give some people some suggestions for solo travelers, especially solo travelers with spouses. One, it's okay. It's okay to go without your spouse, your partner, because we each need our space. We need our time. My husband does this all the time. We both agree. Like, he's like, can I go on this, hey, I want to go on this trip. I want to go to the Southwest and just drive it. He's a photographer. So do photography. I'm like, well, we look at the budget and like, go have fun, go be creative. So this was his way of supporting me with that. And so be able to do it, work together, figure out how to make it work and have fun. But one thing I definitely want to do this trip again. It may not be next year. It may be in a couple of years. Now that I've gotten an idea how it works, to get out of my shell, because I do have a bit of a shell. I was very standoffish because I didn't know anybody. Nobody on that trip I knew. A lot of people did know each other because they were from the same like areas or vintage groups. There was a lot of people, like a group from Colorado, that all knew each other. Be willing to put yourself out there more. Definitely. That first day, get to know the ship, and then be willing to put yourself out there more. And just have fun.
So if people want to find you on social media, tell us your handles.
On Instagram, I'm Nostalgia a la Mode, because my joke is it's a modern life with a scoop of vintage on top. And also you can find me through Facebook that way.
Perfect. Because I think people might want to track you down and say like, hey, tell me more. Or they might want to see pictures of you. Do you have pictures on your Instagram?
Yes, I do. I'm doing several posts throughout the kind of things throughout the trip. My next one is going to be about the world famous Queen Mary 2 high tea. So just some pictures from that and little snippets. And I have some selfies and some pictures of people I met on the trip that I'm going to share towards the end as I get towards New York. So I'm kind of working my way across the Atlantic in my posts.
So some of the things that you sewed specifically for this cruise, you have them there that you can show us?
Yes, I do. So we'll start with some tops that I sewed. So this is just a basic, simple blouse from Wearing History Patterns. It's our smooth sailing part. I also have the trousers I sewed to go with it. Because I needed a simple, just walk around, go have my breakfast kind of outfit. wander the ship blouse, and I loved it. The only thing I did different is I don't like breast pockets, so I just removed the pockets, and I had so much fun figuring out how to sew this pattern, because it is still a traditional vintage pattern with and techniques I've never done before. And it was a blast, especially with yokes and things like that. That's like thing I've never really worked with. And then I have another one of her blouse tops that I loved with a pedalum, which was the fun part to sew. That was little, like, this goes over like a pair of skirts that I have. And so, but my favorite, but all time made me go crazy was sewing my one black evening dress, this 1930s Dolma sleeve pattern that I got from Eva's Dress Patterns. And for someone who does know how to sew and can read a contemporary sewing pattern instructions very well, I found that vintage patterns are, like they say, very vague. Like I just had, here's cut out this, and it just describes in a little sentence to attach this to this with no pictures in most cases. And so you have to kind of construct it in your head first to think you see how it is. And so, as they always say, make a mock-up. I made 2 mock-ups of this dress before I even cut this fabric for the final.
Well, if it's any consolation, it's very much the same with vintage knitting patterns. Sometimes there's a scarce amount of information, and they assume that you kind of have knit before and that you know what you're doing and how to put something together. So.
Oh yeah, and that's one challenge. Like when I started, hopefully this fall, and get back into really learning how to knit. Start with some contemporary patterns, one to get the feel of how the yarn feels through your fingers and the knitting needles. And then there's a couple of vintage needle patterns on Ravelry I've been eyeing, and I'm like, I want to do that. And so.
Oh, so you're on Ravelry.
Yes, as in mode as well. So.
Well, that was a good little addition. You were going to show something with the sleeve detail. Go back and talk about that.
Okay, yeah. So for the sleeve detail on this thing, I have never had to do button loops because the buttons are just little balls, and then I had to have these little loops, which are something I've never done before. And finding instructions on sewing blogs definitely helped. And once I figured it out, it worked. It was just a lot of fun.
We do those in knitting.
Yeah, and
too, sometimes for a little buttonhole, but usually it's done with a crochet hook and yarn to make it.
Mine just regular sewing, regular sewing thread and a sewing needle, and just hope I didn't stab my thumb when I was doing it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. I hope people enjoyed this, even though it really had very little knitting in it. I think it's every vintage knitter's dream to be on a vintage ocean liner. I would imagine. I mean,
I think so.
I wouldn't say no.
I think it would be a vintage person's dream, you know, go shopping for yarn and then enjoy using that yarn as you travel back to the United States. So I think that's what I had in my head I wanted to do, is like pick up some yarn, maybe learn to knit a pair of socks. Didn't happen this time, but maybe next time.
Next time.
So next time.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing with us.
I had a great time, Billy. Thank you.
Oh, take care.
Bye.